Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe. Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe.
Welcome to the Maderi Music Podcast, where we explore the intersections of creative arts, healing, psychology, politics, and social justice. As always, we are your hosts, Dorian Wallace.
And it's your girl, DeMarisa.
Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe. Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe. Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe. Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe. Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe. Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe. Sometimes I speak and I feel like it ain't my words, like I'm just a vessel channeling inside this universe.
Yes, peace and blessings, everyone. It's your girl, DeMarisa, and we're back at it again. So I was having a conversation with my comrade and co-conspirator about disproportionate healthcare for Black and brown folks. And there's so many, subsidiaries of this. We can talk about maternal mortality rate, which is something that I'm very passionate about and been drawn to in the last 2 years. I'm actually in the process of studying to be a doula to get ahead of some of that, but also, and just sidebar, there are many initiatives for Black and brown people to become doulas. And so, if you are passionate about this, if you, just want to be of support to your families, please look out. There are free doula courses, which allow you to not only midwife babies into the world, into their transition into the world, but also be an advocate for women who are just not aware of their rights in terms of, labor and delivery. The other is just the system in of itself, and so I have a friend who's a nurse, and she and I were just, shooting the shit about this. And one, I was just acknowledging that she is a nurse because we don't encourage our children enough in Black and brown communities to be doctors, to be nurses. And this is a part of the reason why we are suffering from disproportionate treatment is because we don't have enough of us to advocate for us. But she was talking about how when you go to more affluent neighborhoods, you see less hospitals. And the reason for this is that, folks who are just in a different socioeconomic status, but also have more access to better foods and better just ways of living, don't get sick as much. The other piece is that there is so much stigma around healthcare because Black and brown people are, have been caught in the structural violence that is healthcare systems, that folks just don't go to the doctor. And the last piece that is not most important, part of us being stripped from our culture is us being stripped from our indigenous ways to treat ourselves, right? So we are not using our herbs. We are not using our teas. We are not growing our own vegetables. I don't know if you notice, but it's difficult to find a supermarket that has fruits with seeds in it. And we're just buying them, right? We're buying seedless grapes. We're buying watermelon without seeds. All of those things are genetically modified, are created in a lab, and are part of the reasons why our young people are developing early, part of the reasons why our young people are having reproductive issues, and part of the reasons why we stay sick. More recently, I also learned, I was talking to a woman when I was in Puerto Rico, and she was informing me that young girls should not be given soy milk because soy has high levels of estrogen. And when I think about when I had my children, there was this sensitivity that was kind of common amongst, children that were born in that era, specifically Black and brown children, to milk. And the first thing that WIC, which is another institution, another program, put our children on was soy milk. And so we're wondering why our young girls are developing at 8 years old. They're, getting their periods. They're, developing breasts and all of these things. But also, we see higher rates of obesity and higher rates of diabetes. All of that a lot of that comes from, and I'm not like a doctor or anything, but just studying and talking to people, comes from estrogen, the high levels of estrogen that are in soy. They're also just not good for young developing boys either. But these are things that we don't know, and we also don't know that there are other options. You can give your children oat milk. There are just many other, there's also, I just learned recently this year that there are like breast milk, I don't know what they're called. I'm going to say like a dispensary, for lack of a better word. I don't know what they're called. Maybe Dorian knows, but like if you aren't lactating, you can go and get donor's milk. That's what it's called. So that your child is still getting breast milk. And some people are leery about that. But when we go back to like our indigenous ways, women who were lactating fed the babies. It wasn't just the maternal mom. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And we shouldn't be ashamed about that. And we should be aware that these options are there instead of just thinking we have to give our children soy-based product. So that's one thing. I also learned recently that like within the Asian community, women are less likely to go through menopause and like the harsh effects that it takes, the hormonal imbalances that happen in your body. And that's because they use high soy diets. And so it's not that we can't have soy, it's knowing which developmental stage we're in and knowing when those things are important to integrate in our diet and when we should take them out. Also knowing that like milk is like cow pus, guys. And I'm saying that more intentionally because when you think of pus, it's like disgusting. And we're just like giving that to ourselves, giving that to our babies. And those things are linked to asthma and just all these other things. So just thinking about that. And so I was doing some studying and, talking to Dorian about this. And it's also landing on me a lot heavily this year for two reasons. One, in March, I lost my father. In January, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And he was diagnosed. It took them a month to do the test and find out like what was going on with him. We were not given an official diagnosis. We were not told which stage of cancer he was in. Literally on a Friday, they gave him a result and was like, yeah, you have cancer. You have a tumor the size of a golf ball. And then the following Tuesday, when we thought he was going in to discuss like the treatment plan, they admitted him and started giving him chemotherapy. My father was 82 years old. And so I was in conversation with the nurse. I wasn't able to get in contact with the doctor, right? Because that's a part of the disproportionate treatment. The doctor may be overworked, or just didn't feel it important enough to communicate with myself and my family to let us know where they were. So I had an intentional conversation with the nurse and I'm like, my dad is 82 years old. And I don't want to rob him of the time that he could have here. So if we're thinking that chemotherapy might be too rigorous for him, maybe we should just do palliative care, which is like just to keep you comfortable and just allow you to enjoy the last few months of your life. And the nurse said, no, your dad is strong, like his vitals are good, like his health is in tip-top shape, and he is going to be fine. We think he'll be great. They gave him chemotherapy and radiation for 3 days. They discharged him on Friday. I picked him up, took him home. They didn't give us any instructions like, you need to watch him, none of that. By the following Wednesday, I got a phone call that my father dropped dead in the middle of the street. And when we had the autopsy done, the cause was a blood clot, which we believe, and which from what I researched, developed from the chemotherapy. But that wasn't even something that they told us to look out for. They didn't even tell him, like, if you're short of breath, if you are feeling overly exhausted, if you just are not feeling well, come back. They didn't tell him any of that. So he just thought, this is just a process. Let me try to push through it. And those are examples of, how healthcare can be disproportionate. Also recently, my mother-in-law had this episode where she started stuttering speech. So she called 911 right away. And when I'm saying stuttering, I'm not saying, I'm flustered and I'm unable to get my words. I'm saying unable to speak, complete like aphasia, difficulty swallowing, difficulty consuming things. And so we're doing research and we're like, it sounds like signs of a stroke. So she goes to this hospital in the Bronx called St. Barnabas, and they treat her. They keep her there for a week. They tell her that they don't see any signs of a stroke. They then refer her to a psychologist and say, like, basically, she's either making this up or like she is overly stressed. And so I was talking to my family and I'm like, I don't believe that's possible. My mother-in-law has a therapist that she speaks to all the time, weekly. So I don't see her, she didn't experience any traumatic event. So I could see if like something happened, she didn't have space to process that and that this caused, this trauma response. But doesn't appear to be a trauma response. It's not that she's just not talking at all. She is unable to speak, unable to write, unable to swallow. And cognitive functions and neurological functions are just very different. So she left, but also feeling defeated, like, I don't know why this happened to me. Is this something I caused on myself? And so I encouraged her, get a second opinion. Don't, trust this place. She gets a second opinion. And when they do her evaluation, not only did she have one stroke, she had several strokes, something called a TIA. Mini strokes. They're like an aura to let you know that you are at risk to have a debilitating stroke. So thankfully, she took the time to go and, get a second opinion. Thankfully, she had support from her family to be able to take her back and forth to hospitals. Thankfully, she had someone like me in her ear to say, you are not crazy. I do believe that you did have a stroke. The doctors can be wrong. These things go misdiagnosed all the time, especially amongst Black and brown people, and you need to get a second opinion. But the reality is that is not the reality for everyone. And so I know at least 2 other people who have had strokes who, because there wasn't a level of intervention in the beginning, who had a TIA, because there wasn't a level of intervention in a timely manner, they suffered long-lasting damage to their brain. And so they've lost utilization of the side of their body. They've lost their ability to speak, and it completely has diminished their quality of life. And so, in doing my studies also, like just, speaking some facts and checking some facts, between 2018 and 2019, maternal mortality has gone up 2.9 times higher for non-Hispanic. I want to get this right. In 2020, the maternal mortality rate for non-Hispanic Black women was 55.3 deaths per 100,000 live births. And also understanding that with these, even with these statistical facts, while they're reporting that they are higher, it still is underrepresented because how many people participate in the census, how many people, in a perfect example is what happened to my mother-in-law, they may have died while in labor, but it was written off as something else to, save the reputation of the hospital, or because, enough people don't believe in autopsies and just so many other things. So 55.3 deaths per 100,000 live births, which was 2.9 times the rate for non-Hispanic white women. Rates for non-Hispanic Black women were significantly higher than rates for non-Hispanic white and Hispanic women. The increases from 2019 to 2020 for non-Hispanic Black and Hispanic women were significant. The observed increase from 2019 to 2020 for non-Hispanic white women was not significant. And so, they're saying that rates have increased amongst ages, so we're seeing higher deaths in young people, women under the age of 25. There's also a higher rate for women 25 to 39. And then significantly, almost 107.9 for those aged over 40. And that's important too, because, we think of young people who are just like, fresh and like whatever, but we're seeing that they're dying while in labor. And another stat that I found alarming is that, there was another study done about just overall, the deaths amongst Black and brown people. And this one was done in 2021, of January 2021. And they're saying that, there were almost 26 million deaths. And this was done in the 30 cities that are most populated by Black and brown people. So this is not fully encompassing the entire world. But I thought what was most important is that they, in the study, it says, a 2019 review of effective initiatives for achieving equity included efforts related to early childhood development, child poverty, job opportunities, and environmental conditions in disadvantaged communities. So in sum, reducing inequities in health requires addressing deep-rooted structural racism in U.S. societies. So this was a study that was done in January 2021, and it's saying that because of disproportionate healthcare, because of deep-rooted structural racism, Black and brown people are dying at alarming rates. And even deeper than that, non-Hispanic Black people are dying at higher rates. And so, my question is, to us, and just not even question, but just to get us thinking, like, what are we doing about this? What are we doing about this? Are we understanding that, like, by not fighting for better school systems, by not fighting for, better healthcare systems, by not fighting for equity at jobs and just in other environmental conditions, the way people are being forced to live, that we are literally agreeing to having blood on our hands?
So you and I are on the same wavelength pretty much consistently, because we literally did not talk about what this episode was going to be about until like 10 minutes before we got on, because we had a guest who was going to come on and he has some childcare issues. And so, we were like, all right, well, what can we cover, just on our own? And all that to say that this is something I've literally been thinking about in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, I want to be clear to everybody that, neither of us are healthcare providers. We're not doctors. So take what we're saying as what you would have, the conversation would have with someone in your living room. Don't take this as medical advice, but also realize that if you are in the medical industry, that these are the concerns that regular everyday people are having concerns with. First and foremost, I'd like to just kind of step back and not even look at race and ethnicity and wealth as our initial disparities points, but I'd like to look at just the disparities between the genders, because that's where it starts, is that if you are femme, healthcare is already worse for you, just on a baseline. And this is a universal experience for rich white women and poor Black women. But the point is that we're going to get into the disparities between those demographics just as the example later. But right off the bat is I think it's really important to acknowledge that inequity starts immediately at the gender gap. This includes trans women, anybody who is femme. This is there's just a drastic inequality with healthcare. And when my wife was about to go into labor, and we're very fortunate because my mother-in-law is a pediatric geneticist, which is, most people don't have that access just in their, in their family, somebody who can give like really informed perspectives that even go against the pediatrician we were seeing at the hospital, where it was like, yeah, that doesn't sound right. Or like they're not looking at this like the right way. And it was, partially because she was just way more engaged with us because it was her baby and her granddaughter who was being born, and she knew a lot more of the personal history on a much more intimate level. So we had a really successful birthing experience just by nature of having that connection to somebody who is an expert in a particular field of pediatrics. But the reason I want to say all this is with that outlandishly ridiculous piece of privilege and access to knowledge and information, we still had to just jump through nonstop hoops. And I'm having a brain fart on the specific point because it's been a couple of years now since my kid got born, but I remember my wife pointing out that some of the shit she had to go through for childbirth, she was like, if men had to give birth, this shit would have been figured out already. Like there would have been billions of dollars pumped into research to solve this. And because it's not men going through this, therefore it's not a priority within the patriarchy. We're just still using archaic technology in regards to bringing a human being into this world. So yeah, I just want to kind of lay that as an initial sort of thought process after everything you just said, DeMarisa. But I'd like to go even further that once that has been laid out, that there is an absolute space of inequality between the genders, there is a next layer into economics and economically disenfranchised populations. And this hits in so many spaces. So there's an author, a medical doctor that I've read some work by, Jason Fung. He's a kidney doctor, but he wrote 2 books, The Obesity Code and The Diabetes Code. And one thing that he pointed out was that we have sort of this marketing that we have within health and wellness, which is that diet and exercise are the foundation of living well. And this is not incorrect, but the problem with it is that it lays out almost that it's 50% diet and 50% exercise. And the point that Dr. Fung makes is that this is not the case. It's actually much more like 80% diet or 90% diet and 10 to 20% exercise and fitness. And so when we look at economically disenfranchised communities, there is a higher rate of fast food restaurants and just cheaply mass-produced processed sugar everywhere, all addictive substances, access to candy bars, access to just all the shitty food that economically disenfranchised people rely on. And so people if you are in a more economically disenfranchised location, you're going to be existing in a food desert. And so from the very beginning, when as a child, you are inputting just toxic shit into your body. And this literally lays down a toxic lifestyle. But to get even deeper is if you look And I remember this when I was coming to terms with my own alcoholism, but the amount of liquor stores that are around the inner city, where people who don't have access to mental health care, it's very easy to numb your trauma with alcohol use. That's what I was doing with my own PTSD for a long time. I remember one of the big eye openers was that, you know, if you go to like a nicer, I'll just like generically say like a nicer part of town, and you go and find like a craft brew, you can get, you know, beer that's like 5% alcohol to like 6 or 7% alcohol. But it costs like a certain amount, and it's like holistic ingredients, organic ingredients, all of this. Whereas you can also go and get a $1 Cobra or a Steel Reserve, which are just the shitty fucking horrible, mass-produced processed sugar pieces of alcohol, but they're only $1, and they have the exact same amount of alcohol content as these higher grade beers. And it's a big fucking problem, because it literally is easier to consume as much alcohol as you need to process through your mental health and process through your trauma. And I don't know, this to me is very much a setup. So all of that to say that we have on the baseline a gap in equity between the genders, a gap in equity and resources for the economically disenfranchised. But it goes the next layer, which is the way that we navigate the world, our positionality. And so that would be whether you're Black or brown, you're going to have a different experience with the healthcare system as a white presenting individual, even when there is economic similarities. What do you think of all that? Hey there, everyone. So you probably noticed there was some craziness going on in the background of DeMarisa's microphone, and that is because she was at the hospital waiting for her sister to give birth. And anyways, we had to cut this episode short because baby started to show up. So we'll continue this dialogue in the next episode. But again, thank you so much. We are Madari Music.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Madari Music. You can subscribe to patreon.com/Madari Music for $5 per month, get a complete second episode every other week, and access our entire archive of premium episodes.
We love doing this, but it requires a substantial amount of time and energy. So our goal is to earn enough to cover 2 incomes.
Thank you so much if you're already a subscriber. Your subscription allows us to remain ad-free and editorially independent.
If you can't contribute financially, please consider posting about us on social media and sharing with your friends and community. You can find everything else on our website, www.madarimusic.com.
In the words of our comrade, Assata Shakur, it is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. We'll see you next time.
$5. Man, that ain't shit.
I don't know if it was worth $5, but it was pretty fucking good.